welcome to the Mo podcast.
A place where individual stories come to life.
This is how we need to be communicating with people. This is how we support people's personal development.
It's important to speak about people believing in people.
The more you're able to let go of your limitation, the more you step into your power, your inner authentic power.
Mo, a place for me, others, everyone.
Welcome everybody to our next episode of the Mo Pod Ventures. We've got Joe McGinn with us here today. Joe, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you like to go through life without referencing a job title, your age, or your relation to anyone else.
Nice. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me on. My name is Joe, and I'm going to avoid the job title. I work for and have been for a while in the kind of social mobility space, where I guess a lot of my work over the past 10, 12 years has been to try and help young people who come from backgrounds similar to mine. So kind of low income, sort of disadvantage in a sort of large umbrella term, to end up with better life chances and life outcomes. And the way I currently help do that at the organisation I'm at now, CoachBright, is by running coaching programs in schools and universities. And it's a model that I think, as you know, and as everyone listening to this will know, is really powerful, and it can be powerful with adults, and it can be powerful with young people, even as young as kind of 5 and 6 year olds. And it's something that we're really proud of. That's how I kind of got into, I suppose I got into the world of coaching via social mobility, rather than the other way around. And so my engagement in the coaching world is probably newer than maybe most of your listeners or other guests you've had on. It's been one of our core values at CoachBright, is that we believe that coaching is transformative, and it has been, understanding this model has been pretty transformative for me.
Amazing. Thank you for the introduction. And beyond that professional Joe, how do you like to spend your free time? Tell us a little bit about who the person is when they're not in that CoachBright, CEO or coaching role.
When I answer this question, I just sound so basic, as like a mid-30s guy with quite basic mid-30s kind of guy hobbies. I'm a big football fan, a big sort of Spurs supporter, have been all my life. I really enjoy reading, just going for walks, hikes. I've got some friends. I live up in Cheshire. I've got some friends coming up, and we're going to go for a hike in Snowdonia. I just try, like, as somebody who has a desk job, just trying to be outside as much as possible is, I don't know. There's rarely a time where I'm standing outside and don't feel quite happy. So it's just quite a nice, it's a very nice thing that I found is quite easy for me to sort of reset and just kind of make myself feel grounded. Really enjoy just getting outside, kind of hikes, adventurous sort of stuff, skiing, and then quite a lot of reading. I don't read particularly fast, but I do read a lot. I don't know what that says, but I like reading quite a lot, and then traveling as well. Less so now, but throughout my youth, try and basically see as much of the world as I could afford, which was quite fun. That's more or less sort of non-work time, I guess. Yeah,
brilliant. Thanks for just starting to paint a bit of a picture of who we'll partly be listening to today. And not basic at all. We don't need to have the super kind of kooky or unusual hobbies to find real richness in life. Absolutely. Yeah. And you spoke about CoachBright. Give us an overview of what a typical work week looks like for you.
Yeah, sure. Most of my week is probably desk-based, and my role is to have quite a lot of external meetings and try and kind of share the word about the work that we're doing with schools and universities and employers and funders and anyone who will listen, basically. So that's a large part of my job, and we've got a really good internal team, so it means a lot more of my role can be much more externally facing, which is good, and just trying to spread the word about the work that we're doing. Maybe once a week to once a fortnight, there'll be some reason for me to travel to either one of our regional bases in Birmingham, London, Reading, or to go meet a university or to visit one of our programs in a school or a graduation celebration event at a university. So yeah, mainly kind of video calls at this desk, but kind of at least fortnightly we'll get out and try and meet people in person as well.
Wicked. And is this role you're in 5 days a week?
Yes, 5 day, yeah, a full-time permanent role. Yep. I've been here for just over 2 years and 3-ish months.
Wicked. And love asking this question because so many of the guests on the podcast have a real degree over how they work. And, as someone that works from home, the vast majority of the time, would you tell us one thing about how you set up your work from home space or the structure of your day and how it relates to working in the place that you live?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, maybe the structure of the day, I typically start, but I work best in the mornings. I think if I have to I don't have to do it often, but if I have to do a long day, I'd rather start early than work late. I think if I'm starting early, I feel like I'm taking charge of my life. Whereas if I feel like I'm working late into the evening, I feel like the man has chained me to the desk and that I have less control and autonomy over it, if that distinction makes sense. And I tend just to lose sharpness as the day goes on, so I tend to be best in the morning. So I'll generally start at 8 o'clock. Most mornings I'll try and do a little bit of reading, a little bit of kind of stretching. One of my New Year's resolutions was to really improve my hip mobility, which has been stopping me running and playing football and stuff. So I'll try and commit to some form of like 20 to 30 minutes of hip stretching mobility stuff, which is quite boring, but it's quite important. So I'll do that most mornings, read a few slow pages of whatever book I'm on, and then tend to try and start around 8 o'clock. When the days are a bit longer, as we're starting to get into it now, there's a nice little canal about a 5-10 minute walk away from here. So
lovely.
It's a long day, kind of a sunny morning, then I'll try and get a few steps in around the canal or the lake or something, which is quite lucky to have kind of a nice canal, a nice river, and a lake and some fields around here as well, which is pretty pleasant.
Wicked. Thank you. I feel like I and hopefully the readers have got this coloured in picture of you and kind of who you are and what you're doing. And in terms of what you're doing with CoachBright, tell us how that started.
I suppose maybe how the organization started and then maybe how I got involved. So the organization started 10 years ago by a brilliant chap called Robin Chu, who I think he's been involved in the Mo community for quite some time. I know he's certainly a Mo graduate, so maybe a lot of your listeners would recognize the name, but he's set the organization up when he was pretty young, I think maybe 21, 22 years old, and did a really excellent job. I won't tell his story in too much detail because it's his story, but I know he benefited a lot from, I guess, the coaching provision that we tried to provide school children when he was at school. And that was his motivation to try and set up the organization. And it's grown and flourished since then. And then Robin led the organization for kind of 7 or 8 years, and then I joined and kind of sort of picked up the role about just over 2 years ago. So I suppose that's the sort of loose genesis on how the organization started. How I got involved, I suppose I studied law at university, but figured out quite quickly that law wasn't what I wanted to do as a career. And then, as a lot of people do, when I finished university, I tried to run away from reality for a bit. So I did a ski season in Whistler for a year, which was good fun. But the summer before that, when I was working to try and save up for that trip, I was just on the way back from taking my little godson Daniel to watch Shrek the Musical. He was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and as I was walking up the stairs at Seven Sisters Station on the way home, there was a bus on fire, and the Tottenham riots had just started. And something neglected to mention, that's where I kind of was living at the time and where I grew up. And that was, without trying to be too dramatic, that was quite a life-changing moment for me. Watching, young people that you'd kind of grown up with feel that they had so little to lose and so little stake in their local kind of society and community. And we could talk for hours on the motivations and the reasons behind that. But ultimately I kind of decided at that point, I think youth work is what I want to do. And I want to try and, as best I can, play a part in making sure that doesn't happen again, or at least mitigating it to some degree. And so, I did the ski season, came back, and then, have been more or less working in youth and education focused roles for, sort of 10 or 12 years since then. How I found out about CoachBright specifically, my previous role, I was working for a nonprofit called Impact Ed, who are brilliant, and their job is to help charities and schools better measure and understand their impact. And then while I was there, I found out about CoachBright, and it was quite a privileged position being in that role, because you can peek behind the curtain in the sector at what is working and what isn't. And the impact reports that we were providing for CoachBright were just pretty staggering. And I've been involved in this kind of provision for a very, very long time. And it's really rare to have a model that works almost all the time in a really significant way for some of the most disadvantaged young people. And so then when I found out about the role, it was something I just knew I really, really wanted to be part of. And so, then that was it. Joined kind of 2 and a bit years ago, and it's been a really excellent decision.
Brilliant. There's so many places I want to jump in there. Thanks for sharing so openly. One of the challenges I see with the next generation that are about to inherit society, or that people under 20 or so, is this real, like you say, this sense of a lack of stake or a lack of connection to the world or the society they're inheriting. The climate crisis, far right ideologies, or cost of living crisis, and feeling like that sense of helplessness or that sense of disconnect, which can so easily lead to extremism or violence or destructive tendencies, maybe, is a nice kind of catch-all. How connected do things like far-right ideologies and politics in Europe feel to what you witnessed in the Tottenham riots?
Interesting. I probably wouldn't say the riots weren't far-right riots at 2011. So they were, in terms of character, they were markedly different to the riots we had in the UK last summer, which were predominantly driven by that far-right ideology. The riots in 2011 were of a different character. Definitely that lack of a stake in your society. And I think, if I was to try and put my finger on it, I think a sense that you won't be able to lead a better life or have a higher standard of living than your parents. And this generation, I'm bang in the middle of millennials, and I think millennials are probably the top of this. But from millennials downwards, for the first time almost in recorded British history, that generation is going to have a poorer standard of living than their parents. And that's the first time that happened, as far as we can tell. And that really leads to a sense that the social contract is broken, and that it doesn't matter if you work hard anymore.
So why should I fulfill my side of this social contract if society isn't holding up their side?
Completely. And you can see this playing out in even sort of like memes. Like, remember the viral meme last summer of I want to meet a man in finance, right? Like that song that was doing rounds. And ultimately, that's not true. What you want to do is meet a man whose dad works in finance, because even if you work in finance, that's not enough to give you a standard of living. It is all, advantage isn't driven by income, isn't driven by work, and isn't driven by what you earn anymore. It is driven by the wealth of your parents. And there are a million different kind of socioeconomic reasons for that. But I think that then leads to this sense of what is the point sometimes.
Yeah.
And, at CoachBright, we can't change that, right? We're a small charity of 11 staff and a few hundred volunteers. We can play our part, and we can try and mitigate some of that, and we can try and address that sense that some young people feel sometimes. But it is something that has to be tackled from all sectors. So
Yeah.
policy on housing, healthcare policy, environmental policy, skills policy, education policy, as well as a focus on social mobility and poverty. They all have to play a part in this. And unless they're all singing together, we won't really make sustainable progress. So that's kind of a long way of saying I think CoachBright and the work that we and other organizations do in this sort of space is really, really important. But us alone, we're not enough. And there has to be real meaningful action from all those other areas as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it takes a village I totally agree with that. I think the parallel I was trying to make was that, and maybe didn't quite connect, was that sense of helplessness leads to people, like you say, leads to people seeking alternatives, or opens people to a possibility of alternatives where it's now attractive to consider actually going down a route that didn't appeal to them at first, or has, its own problems, but there's such a clear case of, well, this isn't working, so I must go and do something else.
Yeah, agreed.
And then so coaching comes in with this lovely, patient, open approach and allows people to what?
Interesting. Well, I would, from the work that we've done with young people, I would think the impact of giving young people the skills to be a coach is as impactful, if not more, than them receiving coaching.
Yeah.
I just think it's incredible, right? And we play one of our programs is a peer-to-peer coaching program where we'll train. We've run it in primary schools as well, but predominantly secondary schools, where we'll train typically year 10 or year 12 students in the basic skills of coaching, how to be a good listener, how to ask effective questions, and then they will coach a younger pupil, normally year 7 or year 10 or something like that. And when we train the senior pupils, one of these games that we basically play is we'll pair up the senior pupils, and one of them I think it's something similar to what Mo do in their course as well, but one of them has to kind of come to that conversation with, say, a challenge or something they want to improve, and then the other is only allowed to ask questions for 5 minutes. And they find that extremely hard.
Yeah.
It's a conversational pattern and a conversational mode that they have just never done before. And teaching,
or seen done either, probably never seen it modeled even.
Completely. And in a school environment where on the whole you're told what to do quite a lot by teachers, giving, rather than kids just modeling that behavior, and that's not a criticism of teachers, they've got a job to do and it's important that they give clear direction and stuff, but it does sometimes mean that other models of other kind of communicational modes aren't modeled and aren't visible. And so teaching young people how to not hijack conversations, how to really, really listen, and how not to just jump in and give advice or tell, I would do this, is utterly transformative. It really is. And it can improve their behavior. It can improve how well they can listen to their teacher. It can improve their engagement in school. I think it's an extremely powerful model that I think is maybe like a sort of sleeping giant in terms of the impact that it can have in schools across the UK. So I think it's extremely powerful.
Yeah, fantastic. And for those of you listening, and you, Joe, I used to work as a mainstream teacher teaching physics in the UK and then abroad for 5 years. And I was training as a coach when I was working 4 days a week as a teacher at an international school in Spain. And I was just absolutely fascinated by these communication models of coaching and being like, wow, this is how we should be facilitating and like connecting with people and supporting people to learn. And then I'd be in the classroom 4 days a week feeling really unable to put the models into place. Like I didn't have time or space in my scheduled hours with each class to teach them through this listening and facilitation mode of communication rather than directive, didactic, or even when you're kind of facilitating it and encouraging them to go on the learning journey themselves, there's still a lot of here's what you're going to do rather than like, hey guys, how would you like to approach your learning today? What kind of activity would you like to do? Is it physical activity? Is it, individual activity? There just didn't feel like there was space for that because there was so much pressure on me from a system to meet the needs of a national curriculum or the exam schedule. And that was what I felt as a teacher, and part of why I then left teaching to do full-time self-employed coaching, because it just felt like a way more compelling way to be doing the work that I wanted to do, which was connecting with people and like being involved at some level in their life path.
Oh, amazing. And for you, because I've not been a classroom teacher, so from your experience, and we're always trying to learn how to embed this even more in schools. So I guess the barrier to the coaching model in classrooms is, as you say, the pressure to get knowledge into young people's heads, and just the numbers, right? The
Yeah.
bigger the group, the more difficult it is to do meaningful coaching. So I don't know, maybe putting you on the spot here, but like in your experience, is there a way that with a class of 30 and you've got an hour or 2 hours in the morning, I don't know, how could we look to try and embed those coaching models a bit more, do you think?
Yeah, it's a huge question, and a question many far more experienced than I have made real progress on. My instinct, and I'll try and just like riff off the top of my head, my instinct says like it's small group work. It's about creating a really strong contract with the group, building really strong rapport, and then like just giving them as much agency as possible. And yeah, I remember finding it so difficult in the classroom. Yeah, I'd be really trying to be team student, and I'd really be trying to like put them first and give them agency and support them, and advocate for them and support them to advocate for themselves. And I'd be like, wow, all I want to do is help you. And they might be coming to my classroom after having had like a really challenging lesson with a teacher that they had a lot of like relational tension with, and they might be repeating patterns that are really normal for them in other lessons, even though I was offering or trying to offer what I felt was like a different approach to connecting with them. And I found that really difficult. And sometimes it felt like I was up against, like I was also feeling the oppression of the school system on me,
Right.
because the kids would bring it with them. The kids would bring any oppression, or oppression is maybe the wrong word, but any tension that they felt as a result of the school system was automatically assumed to also be present in my classroom and in how I wanted to connect with them. And that's really normal. You've had maybe 30 or 40 teachers before you get to your year 10 physics class with Mr. Smith. And we're kind of like, it's fairly reasonable to assume there'll be a pretty similar teacher, or that I can expect pretty similar outcomes to how these other, tens of teachers have interacted with me. And I found that really difficult. And of course, also wasn't a perfect teacher, was also propagating the same, problematic teaching methods that maybe weren't as powerful as they could have been in my imperfect professional life. Like, definitely wasn't a perfect teacher.
No, interesting. That's really fascinating. I mean, I mean, particularly physics, in particular in science, I know they're still crying out for teachers. Is there a world
Mm.
where you return, do you think?
No, absolutely not. Well, there is, but it's not, but not into mainstream education.
Right.
Not where we've got assessment based on your age. Not where we've got such an assessment intensive system. Not where students have so little agency over what they learn. And for me, the education system is so academic.
Hmm.
Like, we're still trying to create generations of scholars and academics, and we don't have a population of people that want to be academics and scholars, and we don't need a population of academics and scholars. For me, I could talk a whole episode about this, but for me, there's three big pillars. It's the arts, it's craftspersonship, and it's like academic things, in
Right.
sciences. I'd love to see an education system where all three of those pillars are equally represented, and students can move seamlessly from one to the other and graduate based on their progress or like mastery of these things rather than on their age. And I feel like we need a complete like burn
Interesting.
also ground rebuild rather than small changes. And
Nice.
also, like, the education system as it stands can be really meaningful and can really support people and can create amazing outcomes for people. So, like, yeah, I wanna speak to that and say, it's not all bad, and there are incredible professionals doing incredible work all throughout the education system. Um, and yeah, I feel like we all know the system doesn't work, but there's just not enough people talking about it.
No, interesting. I've never heard that kind of suggestion of the three pillars expressed that way. That's quite interesting. So arts, craftsmanship, and what would you call it? Kind of traditional
Academia,
academic
sure.
stuff.
Yeah, whatever you
Okay.
want. Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like that's really obvious. Like, and what percentage of our pie chart of our current education is based in arts or is based in, craftspersonship? And just to kind of bring this back from being an education podcast to being a
Yeah,
coaching
sure.
podcast, the work I see, companies like CoachBright and others doing in schools, and there are companies that are bringing coaching culture into schools who are training whole staff bodies, like
Yeah.
they're doing staff training, inset days, and then training those staff to be coaches, coaching those staff so they experience coaching and encouraging them to bring a coaching principles to their teaching, doing amazing work. And it's work like that that I feel goes from a very transactional, we teach, you absorb system that isn't really supporting us to be our most powerful and vibrant selves. It's that work that I feel is really starting to shift the narrative and show that actually we get into the nuance of it. We can really improve this model.
Nice. I like that. That's big systems thinking. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've unpacked my change for the educational model, and I didn't expect for it to come up today, but I'm glad it did. Thank you.
Interesting. When was that? When did you leave the profession?
So that was 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, there would be schools that would bite your hand off to return. I know that definitely.
Yeah, but probably only as a physics teacher, which is a shame. I would love to do work in the education system. And, I love working with young people, and I feel like like what Mo's doing. One of Mo's big mission statements or values is working with young people or working with coaches or training coaches who will work with young people, because that's where we feel the biggest impact can be made.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and talking about young people, this idea that you've mentioned absolutely fascinates me. 5 and 6 year olds being trained in rudimentary coaching and communication models. Tell me about where CoachBright is working with people at that age.
Nice. Well, it's very much in pilot phase. We finished a pilot with a primary school called Brooklands Farm in Milton Keynes, which is a pretty big primary school. I think it's sixth form entry. And the woman who founded the school and leads it, the head teacher, a woman called Maxine Lowe, is just a trained coach and kind of really gets involved in this stuff.
And just to come in, sixth form entry means there's 6 classes in each year group?
Correct. Yes. Good
Right.
clarification. Yeah. So 6 classes of around 30 in each year. So it's a big primary school.
Yeah.
And so we ran a pilot where we trained, it was really small. We trained 10 year 5 pupils in the basic skills of coaching. So how to be a good listener, how to ask effective questions, etc. And then they were matched with 2 pupils from year 1. And after we did the training, then for about 10 weeks actually after that, one of our program managers went in and then facilitated those coaching trios. There was about there was 10 of these coaching trios, and the senior pupils would go and collect their 2 junior coachees from their classroom and walk them to the room we were doing the coaching in, holding their hands either side. And it was just, to be honest, we weren't sure if it was going to work. We just weren't sure. With any kind of pilot, there's always an element of sort of stuff you're testing, right? But it was just amazing. The first couple of weeks, the senior pupils, we had to run sort of debrief coaching sessions with them afterwards, because understandably it took a few weeks for the junior pupils to kind of stop fidgeting and understand what was actually happening and really listen. But after a few weeks, the real power in that program is when we keep the coaches behind at the end of it, rather than us troubleshooting any kind of problems that went on during the session, they kind of support each other. So if there's one coach who said, "Oh, my coachee just didn't listen to me," or "My coachee didn't use the iPad the way I asked, what should I do?" We stay silent and we allow the other year 5 pupils to jump in and go, "Oh, this worked with my coachee, you should try this." And then when it does work, then I don't know, they really, really bond as a community of leaders within the school. And it's really crucial that we try and run this in year 5, because then there's at least 1 year where they are the leaders of the primary school, and there's a
Yeah.
real kind of leadership community.
Yeah.
And the transitionary skills that they take into year 7, into a secondary school, of being more independent, of being able to listen, of not always relying on an adult, is amazing. And it sets them up really, really well for a big life change, going into a school of 1,000 or 2,000 other pupils where you're the bottom rather than the top. So we're really, really excited. The impact on the junior pupils was really amazing. So we saw significant improvements in their phonics, which was the focus of, I guess, the subject primarily that we were looking at, phonics and reading. But with kind of a small group and with kids that age, I suppose the quantitative data has a role, but really the power comes from what the kids are saying. And we had a couple of examples. There was one boy who, in his kind of feedback journal at the end, or his coaching journal at the end, said, I've got a younger brother who has speech and learning difficulties, and I've used my coaching skills with him to try and help he and I communicate more strongly and better together. And so that was something we never imagined. That's something we never predicted would happen, that children at the age of 9 and 10 would take these coaching skills, really cement them in their head, what they are and how to use them, and use them outside. We sort of hoped that might happen, but we didn't really expect it. And we've been absolutely blown away. We're really, really chuffed. And I can't remember when this podcast goes out, but we're hoping to secure some support from the University of Winchester to pilot this in 3 primary schools around there as well, because they're putting a lot of focus into improving attainment at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 in kind of the schools around that university. So we're really hopeful that the program will grow. And yeah, it's been really exciting to watch the development of that pilot.
Yeah, fantastic. Just from a universe, big thank you from all of us here in the universe for doing some work, doing some of this work that feels like amazing. Like, wow, imagine getting such a powerful example of leadership modeled to you at such an early age. Yeah.
It's really amazing. I went to 1 or 2 of the sessions, and it's just a joy to be in that room. It's just really, really wonderful.
Yeah. How long were these sessions?
It depends on the school's timetable, but the sweet spot is sort of 45 minutes, with between 10 and 15 minutes after, just with the coaches. To keep them behind. One thing we did learn is in future we probably will do the age gap of year 5 to year 2s. We'll probably test that. The pilot was year 5 to year 1s. We might test it with a slightly older age group and just kind of like see if there's any differences there. But we think the sweet spot is basically 45 minutes of the coach and the coachees with each other, and then the coachees leave, or the coach walk their coachees back to their classroom. They come back, and then we have a debrief with them where they kind of troubleshoot each other's kind of problem and learn from each other. Yeah, exactly. The coaching supervision, which they then start doing to each other, which is brilliant.
Brilliant. Wow, fantastic. And it brings to mind in my head this kind of big or quite deep or quite complex question: what's needed to coach? Because if 5 and 6-year-olds, or if we got 10-year-olds in year 5 doing it, then giant emotional maturity or deep self-awareness. And even as I say that, I'm thinking, well, maybe we don't have that as adults, or we're thinking and we've got those as adults, but actually we've already got them as children. What's needed to coach? Like, what are the traits? Okay, the question I'm asking: what are the traits that are present in these 10-year-olds that allow them to be impactful coaches?
Oh, great question. I mean, number one, and I think this also applies to kind of adult professional and executive coaches, is you really have to sort of want to do it. You have to believe in, and I'm probably putting this in obviously terms that 10-year-olds wouldn't explain that, but you have to be excited by the conversations that you're going to have. And I think that the technical skills of coaching, you don't need to be a straight A student. You don't need to be a genius to kind of understand and execute the basic principles of being a coach, active listening, good questions, not hijacking, etc. I think what you really need to have is, as I mentioned, you need to like believe in that model. So the kids have to be excited by the opportunity of learning how to be a good listener and how to communicate with younger pupils and how to be a leader. And then the other thing is, I think you have to care about people.
Yeah.
You have to care about their outcomes, not in a sense that, as we know, the coach isn't accountable for the outcomes, the coachee is, but you have to want to be able to help people. And I think those are the traits that we saw in the kids. They were really excited to do this, and they weren't just excited because of the skills that they were going to learn. They were excited by the prospect of becoming a role model and becoming a leader to junior pupils and helping somebody younger than them.
Yeah, yeah. And at some level, I find that surprising. There's definitely a story in me that it's difficult, or kids are young people aren't always excited to help other young people. There's a story in me that young people can be selfish, and the excitement or motivation for altruism can be difficult to come by.
Yeah, I think it is. I do think that's bravado.
Yeah,
Particularly at secondary
it totally
school.
is, isn't it? Yeah.
I just think it's bravado, and I think it's what gives you although the things change between different generations of teenagers, there are some things that don't change, right? Status is important among your peers. It's important at any age of life, but it's particularly important when you're a teenager. And so, what gives you status? So, if there's a culture within the school where what gives you status amongst your peers is being a bit of a bully or being mean, then you won't be attracted to that. If there's a culture in the school where what gives you status and what makes you feel important is the impact you have on others, then that barrier disappears immediately.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Like, what's such clearly how we model to these young people, the importance, the sense of power, all through the education system, is being a teacher, being someone's guide, being an elder, maybe metaphorically rather than literally. Yeah, of course, that makes sense. And it was teenagers where my mind went to around like motivation around altruism, being like, wow, yeah. I've worked at some inner city London secondary schools, Joe. I'm not sure we're just going to get these people being like, yeah, I'd love to help these other students. But you're so right that there are so many examples in my memories from being a teacher of students helping others. And something that's really been coming up for me just in the last week or so of like a bit of real conscious awareness around is how we as humans so often look to protect other humans from how we've been hurt.
Oh, interesting.
We try and support people through the same challenges we've faced, and that's a really human thing to do. And it feels like it's just coming up in this conversation again.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, in our, maybe a little bit of a plug here, in our annual report that we published about a month or two ago, it's one, I think it might be the first case study we have, and it's from, I think they were, a 17-year-old coach called Sadie, Lower Sixth, who we trained to be a coach, and then her coachee, who was a 14-year-old called Lexi, and they were paired up. And I'm just kind of got the case study in front of me. And the thing that really comes out from the coach, Sadie, I'll read the kind of first line. So we asked her, why did you want to become a peer coach? And she said, I remember how hard I found school, not knowing what to do or how to revise for my GCSEs. It was overwhelming. So if I could make that experience a little bit easier for a younger student, then why wouldn't I? So that kind of is the nail on the head of what you've said. What we do also do as part of the program, because you're right, that instantly, particularly at the start, that won't be attractive to every young person, the ability of helping others. They're all sort of wired differently. So we do sometimes try and Trojan horses. What we'll do is the senior pupils who we train to become coaches, over their journey of development as a coach, they earn an accreditation. So it's called an SSAT, Student Leadership Accreditation. And for those pupils where the altruism isn't the hook, sometimes that is the carrot, right? So when we interview them at the start and we'll say, why did you want to be a peer coach? They say, I really wanted the accreditation. It sounds really good. By the end, when we say, are you glad you were a peer coach? They don't mention it. They say, I'm just really glad I was able to help a younger peer. So you can, those mindsets, as we know from the grow model and from Mo, those mindsets are not fixed. And even if a young child thinks they won't value having impact on a younger peer, that can very quickly change. And so we try and Trojan horse that into the program sometimes with those sorts of senior pupils.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think there's such a self-evident power to coaching once you've either experienced it or once you've done it, that that absolutely hooks us or keeps it in our lives. I remember maybe just a few months after qualifying, my partner who I was living with at the time said to me, like, stop using coaching questions on me. I was like, it's just how I talk now. It's just a better way of communicating. I'm sorry. And there's definitely like, consciously taking your coaching hat, putting your coaching hat on and off. And also it has proliferated the way I talk, because in so many ways it is a really powerful way of communicating with others.
Yeah, it really is. And it also, it allows you to check yourself when you're communicating with other people in a way that maybe isn't helpful. I'm sure we all think that we never hijack conversations or never give unsolicited advice, but no doubt at some point in our lives, even now as experienced coaches, we probably do at some point, right?
Of course,
and once you've got that framework, I think it allows you to spot both when you're doing that and when others are doing that as well. And it gives you sort of a name and a title and a framework for these kind of behaviors that you probably understood, but perhaps weren't able to title and weren't able to kind of put a name on. And I think that's really powerful. And that's something that, well, for me, has really stayed with me as I've kind of learned about the basic coaching skills.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really common feedback we get on the Mo course after the first session, after the first week, when we come in on session 2 and we're talking to people about, so did you try out any of the rudimentary coaching techniques? We set them their homework or some assignments, and one of this is just using coaching or thinking about dropping in some of these coaching techniques. And so often people are saying, I realized I'm always interrupting my son, or I realize I'm not a very good listener. Or and it's so often it's like, I've just had this great realization about the typical listening or speaking, typical communication patterns that are really present in the relationships that I am in every day.
Yeah, completely. And then once you see that, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
It's then a framework that you use for almost everything, whether probably not consciously, but subconsciously it's a framework that, is definitely rooted in the back of my mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the world keeps turning and people get better and better at listening and society changes and it's all going to be okay. Fantastic.
I like that. Yeah.
So the law degree, getting into CoachBright, when did your Mo qualification come in or sit in that tableau?
The Mo accreditation was shortly after I joined CoachBright. And excuse me, every full-time member of the team, when they join CoachBright, we put them on the Mo course.
Right.
We think it's at interview. We will typically ask people if they've got coaching experience. Most people will have an idea of what it is and maybe have kind of done elements of it before. Very few people will have a coaching accreditation, and we think it's less so the accreditation, more just the experience of going through, it is intense in a good way. You practice a lot and you do a lot of coaching, and you really, really, learn about the model. And one of our core values, as I mentioned, is we believe coaching is transformative, and we believe it can be transformative for anyone in any setting and in any context. So that it was really important that I became coach accredited, and given CoachBright and Mo's kind of long-standing history, it was always going to be with Mo, and the course was excellent. All our team who go on it just say really wonderful things about the impact it's had on them and how it's helped them with not just their work with young people, but also their work with external stakeholders and managing perhaps challenging or difficult conversations. And one thing we're trying to do a lot more of now is to really embed the practices of coaching into everything we do internally as well. We've made some progress on that, but our focus has been more on our external work and beneficiaries, which makes sense. But we really want to live and breathe it. And we want that value of transformative coaching to run like a stick of rock through everything we do in the organization. So every line management conversation, every kind of team meeting, the way we write documents, the way we do presentations, the way we present information. It's something that's really in our DNA, and we're going to spend the next kind of 18 months really fleshing out how we embed it in everything we do.
Great. Sounds radical, sounds progressive, sounds like it's going to be a really wholesome and healthy place to work in.
I hope so. And well, no doubt we won't get every element of it right, and we'll kind of learn and revise things as we go on. But yeah, we all believe in the power of having those conversational and listening skills. And so it's something we want to do even more of.
Nice. And just a kind of interesting tangent that's just come up to me here. Thinking about these young people, as young as 10 or these teenagers, how long's the training that that they go through before they start coaching their fellow students?
So their training's really short. Their training is basically as long as we can get with them initially. So the training will be between half a day and a full school day. And so that's just really, really kind of basic stuff. So like, we give examples of hijacking conversations, the different types of listening, and then we just get them to practice and practice and practice and practice over and over again. But really their training is throughout, similar to Mo, right? Really their training is, you don't learn from the theory, you learn by doing it. So when they're coaching a younger peer and then they have the debrief supervision sessions each week, their training is kind of continuous. Kind of short initial training, and then it's normally between 8 to 10 weeks of weekly sessions where I suppose like driving a car, right? You learn after you do your lesson, right?
Yeah.
So we make sure they're kind of continually learning. And then we've got some schools who are continuing with even beyond the formal work that we do with them, are taking that and they're trying to get other year groups involved as well. So what we really want, the real big picture is, I don't know, in 10 years from now, can we have played a really key role in embedding a coaching culture in schools in England? And maybe then you'll come back and be a science teacher. So I'll keep you updated on how that progresses. But I think like every school that we've worked with really sees the value in this. And even, charities don't exist to stay in existence, right? They exist to try and solve a problem and to have impact. And if throughout this work in 10, 15 years time, that means there's no longer a role for CoachBright because, these models have been so embedded in kind of the world of education and with young people, then great. There's no need for us to exist anymore. So if we really want transformative impact, I think that's what we've got to aim for.
Yeah, great. Love that big picture. And just coming back to that initial question, that you touched on a parallel that I was wondering might be present in that it's a very short amount of training and still seeing a powerful impact. And I feel like the Mo course as a training course is much shorter than many other courses. And yet, as a trainer on the Mo course and someone who was trained on the Mo course, it feels complete. And I often describe it as this is a foundational course that gives you all of the core tools that you'll need to go anywhere with coaching. And also, it's maybe like it's significantly shorter than many other coach training courses, and that feels absolutely fine. And I'm just, it feels like, there's a really rich parallel there that kind of confirms these ideas that I've had for a while. And what you say about so much of the learning being the ongoing by doing really resonates with my experience as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the what makes people, in my view, a really good coach is the habit formation. It's where the forms of listening and the forms of not having a fixed mindset and the forms of questions that you ask people are almost subconscious. I think that's the bit that takes time, is when you're not having to go through your kind of question checklist consciously. It's where you've done this for so long that you kind of know instinctively the right question to ask or the right place to go next. So that's why I actually don't think the course itself and the theory and the material needs to be overly long. I think what makes people good coaches is really practicing it and committing those habits to memory to the point where they almost become subconscious.
Yeah, Yeah. I love that. And a huge shout out to all the coach training providers that have much longer courses and will be supporting their trainees through a longer incubation period where they've got that access to the tuition, to supervision, to someone to bounce any ideas off. Like, absolutely not throwing any shade on those coach training providers, and also curious about how Mo seems to have a really powerful impact and train really powerful coaches despite being quite a lot shorter in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely, and we've really seen evidence of that because this one of our other programs that isn't in schools is we will coach undergraduates in the first 1 or 2 years at university. Typically, undergraduates who have come from an underrepresented background, and the evidence suggests they're more likely to drop out, less likely to complete their degree, less likely to attain well, etc. And so we've been for 3 years, we're just coming out of pilot phase now. We've been running a program we call Life Cycle, where previously it was our internal team who are all Mo graduates would provide one-to-one coaching to these students at university. And then this year, because we've expanded the number of partnerships, we've expanded, I guess, the coaching out to include Mo graduates and Mo alumni. And yeah, it's the first year we've done this, and it's been really fantastic. We're so grateful for, I guess, both the time and the passion and commitment that all of these Mo graduates have shown. And yeah, it's something we really want to learn from and improve for next year. But I really wanted to, I know we're approaching time, but I just really want to give a massive shout out and a massive thank you to the Mo graduates who have volunteered with us and just the wider community. And I suppose Mo itself for attracting people who would want to do that as well. I think there's something broader there, which goes right to the heart of, the mission and the values of Mo, is that it attracts a lot of people who want to do this kind of thing and want to support young people on that program. So a big shout out both to the individuals and then to the wider Mo team, because it's something quite special.
Yeah, thank you. And again, like, a big thank you from me and everyone at Mo for all the Mo graduates who get involved, gifting their time and energy to having an impact. I definitely think of it as the Mo hug. And when each training course, I start with a new team of coach trainers and with a new cohort. I think of it. We do some conscious and intentional facilitation to create that atmosphere that makes it feel like the Mo hug. And also it just happens every time. There's this beautiful sense of community, loving care, and it comes right down from Darren and now John and Matt, where Mo came from. What Darren used to say about coming from a mother's love, and that just it's just at the center of everything. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's pretty special, and I don't know many other organizations with that kind of character. So it's pretty unique, and it's something to really feel. Well, the whole Mo team should be really proud of that, because it's pretty special.
Yeah, thank you. And so many of your coaches are volunteer coaches, or all of your coaches, is that right?
All of our kind of adult coaches, so excluding the peer-to-peer program where we train basically pupils in schools, we recruit several hundred undergraduates who we do some basic coach training with, and then they will volunteer in some of our partner schools as well and do kind of small group coaching. And then all the Mo graduates are volunteers with us as well. So it's a real community kind of civil society effort to have this impact, which we're really chuffed about.
Great. Can't wait for people on the Mo course to be telling me, oh yeah, I've done a bit of coaching just through, when I was at school with CoachBright. Oh yeah, nice. That's lovely. And thinking about like a lot of your coaches being, volunteers or Mo graduates, I imagine that for many of them, it might be their first associate coaching position.
I suspect it is. I think quite a lot of the graduates were people who maybe have completed their course quite recently. So, we're not expecting people to coach in that program for forever. People have, their own lives, and they've got to look after themselves and bills to pay and stuff. And we understand it's a commitment. But it is an opportunity that's there. If people want to coach an undergraduate who really could do with the support of someone who's gone through the Mo course, then yeah, that opportunity is there, and we'll no doubt be putting more calls out for next academic year as well.
Yeah, brilliant. I remember finishing my Mo qualification and having a very, very open timetable, understatement. And yeah, I would have bitten your hand off at the opportunity to do some associate coaching, with a company that was putting coaches in front of me and giving me some rudimentary kind of training on policy and how to coach for an organization. I went on to do to hold a few different associate roles, and it's always very different, very, very different, and yeah, some like low pressure experience would have really helped me in those positions that I got later on in my coaching career.
Oh, fantastic. Well, the door is always open.
Yeah, and it's as hearing you talk about it and talking to you about young people and coaching them, it's really inspiring me and making me consider where I might like to work and how impactful I found that work when I was doing it. So yeah, I'm not taking it off the table, Joe.
Good to hear.
I'm going to give you a series of quickfire questions, some of which relate to coaching and some of which have nothing to do with coaching. And then the final question, which is I really welcome you to ponder on for a moment or two.
All right.
And just, no pressure to produce absolute wisdom here, just the first thing that comes to your mind. What am I starting with? What's the most powerful thing about coaching?
The most powerful thing about coaching is the ability to create really good listeners. That's what I think it is. And if you are a good listener, and if you have the ability to, we've got two ears and one mouth for a reason, as the cliche goes. If you have the ability to be a really good listener, that can both allow you to help and have impact on so many other people. It can also help you as well. The more you listen, the more you learn, and the more you understand about people in the world. So that's what I think is the most powerful thing about coaching and coaching skills.
Great. Next question. Quick fire now, Joe. Most used social media platform in your personal life?
Reluctantly, Twitter, X. Yeah.
Most used social media platform in your professional life?
LinkedIn is basically the only one I use for professional stuff.
What was one other of your New Year's resolutions?
It was to basically become a better swimmer. And partial success. I've been to 4 lessons since the start of the new year, so partial success.
Fantastic. How much of coaching is the relationship you create with your coachees, and how much is the specific words or actions you take during a session? Percentage.
I would go 65 the skills and questions to 35 the relationship.
Thank you. Favorite physical stretch?
One I did this morning, which is threading the needle, a hip opening stretch. Enjoyed that.
Sounds interesting. I'm going to look that up. And lastly, and feel free to take a few moments with this, what's a piece of advice, mantra, or catechism that you want to leave our listeners with?
Wow. A piece of advice. Probably really try and use the wrong word. Really try and with this community, the Mo community is pretty special, and you get out what you put in, I think. And I haven't met many other kind of groups or communities that quite have this culture and quite have this character. So maybe don't miss the opportunity to really relish and embrace this community that Mo have created.
So don't hold back from putting in.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, wicked. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. So much rich exploration there of some really pertinent and powerful topics. Is there anywhere you'd like people to interact with you or get in touch with you? Anything you'd like to plug or share? Any links? Anywhere you'd like to direct any of our listeners before we just bring this to a close?
Oh yeah, one plug, which was the only thing I wanted to plug, and I've completely forgotten, is we next academic year we will be running a research trial of our peer-to-peer coaching program in secondary schools, specifically to try and improve maths outcomes and school attendance of disadvantaged young people. It's going to be funded by a charity called the Education Endowment Foundation, who find promising interventions for young people and then test them at scale. So places is going to be a funded opportunity. Places are limited to 100 schools across England. So if you work in a secondary school or know someone who does, then please just go to coachbright.org/EEF, and all the details are there.
Brilliant. And maybe just to extend that, if you're a parent of someone who'd love coaching models to be more present in the school of one of your kids, you can always forward it on to schools, to the school they're at. Joe, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to everyone listening. And we'll catch you for our next Podventures.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Alex. Take care.